Shalom Mishpacha, and welcome to Get Organized God's Way. I'm Eileen Koff, and I am a certified professional organizer. My ministry, Eileen Koff Ministries, is here to help you to discover how to bring God's order into your spaces. And where there is God's order, there is His peace and His purpose that gets fulfilled in your life on the day to day. It was interesting. I belong to a minister's podcast, and he's very much into numbers. And as a Messianic, or prior to becoming Messianic Jew, when I was in synagogue, I was very much into Kabbalah, numerology, and things. And I loved that I could find a pastor that was just as intrigued as to God's numbers and his understanding. And pastor's name is Pastor Troy Brewer. He's in Texas, and I think his church is called Open Door Church, Open Door Ministry. Anyway, I get his every day, his devotions, and I couldn't help but notice that the month of October, he has number 10 as being God's perfect order. And so I just thought, oh, that's just so appropriate, because in the month of October, number 10 is the month that I always come to you explaining the spiritual warfare significance of what the enemy wants us to do, to have so much disorder in our lives. And I just thought this was just so perfect, that number 10 means, and then I looked it up because I wanted to make sure that that was right. Right? We always have to double check stuff. And it does. It means perfect order, completeness, number 10. So in the month of October, which is the month number 10, instead of the spiritual warfare where we're, like it's everywhere right now, it's God's way of saying, wait a minute, no, this is exactly the opposite. This is my perfect order for you. And that's what Eileen Koff Ministries wants to do, is to bring His perfect order into your life in the month of October. Well, every month, but especially the month of October, when I talk about the spiritual warfare implications. The last 2 weeks, I spoke on a couple of the chapters that are in Get Organized God's Way. That's my Bible study, if you didn't know. And the first one was about objects and things that are passed down to us, or things that we may have in our homes that create a disorder or in conflict with God. So if you get a chance, go check those out on my web page, eileenkoffministries.com. They should be up in a couple of weeks. And then last week I talked about generational disorder or confusion, that people that have really a hard time finding order, trying to get order into their lives. And I talked about how always, 100% of the time, when I approach this topic with these individuals, someone in their family has also had it. So it's a passed down generational spiritual issue. So I brought those up in the last 2 weeks. And those really are in the Bible study. Those are the 2 chapters that I really go into deep detail as to the spiritual warfare implications, as to what clutter and disorganization brings to your life. So this week I'm looking at, I have a client, and I'm looking at the struggles that people, what's like outside of paper, which is like number 1, what is a major spiritual struggle that people have in their homes. And it's not just, this one client that I'm dealing with right now, but it's been so many over the past, I started my business in 98. And over all of these years, it has just been one concept after another concept that seems to be very much part of our society. It's like so ingrained to us that we don't even understand why it's that way. And that's easy. That's our closets. I know. So you're thinking, oh yeah, I mean, you just hit on it. You just hit the button on my life. Yeah, my closets are, no, I can't get my toe in, or a lot of people have closets that, are okay, but they just, they forget what's in there, or, there's just so many different, different things that people have in their closets. And I thought, I go back and I'm looking at my Bible study, and I realize that our clothes closets are the number one first sin that was entered into the world. And I went, oh, that's crazy. That's like, when we're talking about spiritual warfare here, that would be like, what would be the number one sin that happened? All right, so I'm going to read it to you, because you're sitting there going, Eileen, really seriously, our clothes closet is our number one sin? Yeah. Okay, so bear with me. So it's in Genesis because it's number one. Okay, and it's chapter 2, Genesis chapter 2, which is, right up there as the first thing that we're talking about in terms of spiritual warfare. I know, it's kind of funny. But here's what it says. It says, and they were both naked, and man and his wife, and were not ashamed. Okay, they're not ashamed, they're naked. And the serpent said to the woman, here we go, okay, spiritual warfare number 1. Ye shall not surely die, for God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be open, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Okay, so the first thing that came into sin, the first sin, was Satan tempting Eve to eat of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, right? All right. Number 1. All right, spiritual warfare number 1. And so this is basically what Satan does. This is his lie. He says, go ahead and eat of the tree, and you will be the God you were meant to be. You can run your own life, and you can decide your own path. Basically, that's what he's saying to Eve. And just having the conversation with this serpent, with the enemy, Eve moves from the trust in God, and she is plummeted into another world that is without trust. All right, so just by listening to the enemy's lies on whatever day this was in the garden, could have been the second day, could have been the billionth day, I don't know. I think someone does. But anyway, just by listening to him, spiritual warfare number 1, right? Okay. And just by having the conversation, it then escalates into the fall of man. Okay, so kind of here's where this closed closet thing starts. So the fall created a state of high anxiety, which was, I guess, number 1, shame, right? And Adam and Eve perceived this as separating themselves from God and from each other. So the fig leaf I write this hysterical story in Get Organized God's Way. I was driving home from church one day, and this conversation came into my brain, and I went, okay, this is hysterical. I'm going to have to include this. And so, if you get the study Get Organized God's Way, you'll see this funny little conversation that Eve has with Adam about the fig leaf. But anyway, so the fig leaf, outside of all the other leaves that they could have been, was the first separation from God. And the second separation from God was hiding. Okay. So the first one is trying to find something to clothe themselves with. And the second one was hiding from the Lord. And so when we're talking about spiritual warfare in the month of October, and we want to see, okay, what would it take to understand the first sin that is still so prevalent in our society today, that even as we speak, I have a client that is dealing with this issue. Unlike many of the other clients that I have had in the past, she's not alone in her struggle, but the amount of materialism within her life in the closed closet is very much a reflection of spiritual warfare. And when and if the client ever understands this, it will make every difference in her life. And I'm praying that it's not just her. I know it's not just her, but I'm praying that by my being able to relate this situation into your life, that you will be able to understand the spiritual warfare significance of what we have in our closed closets. Okay, so I thought that in Get Organized God's Way, I have in here this on page 152. I want to read a little bit of this to you because the written word sometimes is a little bit better than my just talking it out here. So it says, after the sin, new effects of sin entered the world. Okay. A new industry was born. And I write, or not born, but it was birthed. And I call it fashion. Okay. Eve could never have foreseen the effects that her action would have so far into the future, nor the enslavement that women would shoulder. From that moment on, women would find their identity. And it's just like, they found their identity through the clothes or through the things that they thought that they should have put on themselves as they sewed. Like, how did they learn to sew? Like, how was that possible? Maybe they made tablecloths and they sewed tablecloths. I don't know. But I just think that's so funny when I'm sitting here and they sewed fig leaves together. I'm going, how did they do that? Like, how did they learn sewing when they were? So that's just my thoughts. Anyway, I said that women would also desire a different body type so that others would find them more desirable. And as quickly as women change their minds about what looks good, an increasingly dominant fashion industry bombards them, telling them that what looked good yesterday doesn't work today. So, in other words, what we have in our clothes closets in the past doesn't work, but it's still there. And we keep getting more, and we keep getting more, and keep getting more. And that's what I keep seeing in these clients that I have gone into, is that the fashion industry, or the things that say what looked good yesterday, and you have so many of them, you got to get some more. So so I think you're beginning to understand the spiritual implications of all of this. And it's not just our clothing, but it's the identity that we are wrapping ourselves in, that we want to not only present to ourselves, but it's how we present ourselves to the world. And Jesus had so much to say about this. So the next part in the study is, I think, probably the most important aspect of when you're talking about spiritual warfare and how man thinks that they can cover themselves up, and what God has to do in order to redeem them from their sin. And this just kind of blew my mind as I was getting this study together. So, in other words, Adam and Eve thought that that they had to cover themselves up with, and so they went and they decided that the fig leaf was the best, and they sewn the aprons, they put it on. Now, remember, this was before the fall, and I'm thinking, okay, they've probably never seen they've never seen leaves dry up, right? There was no concept of death prior to the fall. Death in trees, death in anything. So they didn't understand that after the fall, those fig leaves that they sewed as aprons, I can't imagine what this looked like. One day we'll find out. But they were going to dry up and crumble and wither, and they were going to have to probably have to keep doing this industry called sewing going all of the time. But God said, no, we're not. I'm going to do something better for you. You're not going to have to think about having to redress yourself every 3 weeks or 2 weeks or a month or whatever it was that it would take. What did God do? God took a lamb. He shed the lamb's blood, and he gave them coverings from the lamb. Now, fast forward thousands of years, and what did God do to cover up our sin? He shed a lamb's blood. And that was the only way that we could be redeemed in God's eyes, is by using and understanding that the lamb's blood redeems us from our sin. Do you see the similarities here? Do you see the incredible, like the number one sin that they had to do was to cover themselves up and hide? The next one is that in order to get that sin redeemed, God had to step in. God had to kill a lamb. God had to shed his blood in order to use the lamb's wool to cover themselves up with something that was durable, something that would not fade every few weeks. And when you may just be spinning your head around this one right now, but when I got this, when the Lord showed this to me, from a professional organizer's point of view, seeing how incredibly similar our lives are in terms of what we need to cover ourselves up with, that not only, like I said before, changes from year to year and causes so much grief and disorder in our lives because of this, that I have to include this in the spiritual warfare month as to the number one reason that this is such an important topic to cover on the Messianic Lamb Network. So I just praise God for enlightening me and to this understanding. So before we go on, I need to pray, because the Lord just reminded me, you haven't done that yet. So let's bow our heads and give him all the glory. Father, I am humbled to be sitting here today, speaking into your kingdom to ready themselves for the purpose that you have set before them. Father, I give you all the glory for what you are doing right now through me. So infuse my words, Holy Spirit, as I speak. Father, clear my mind of all distractions and prepare those that are now listening to see how this clutter, this disorganization within their closets, within their spaces, is truly going to be affecting their eternal kingdom purposes. So, Holy Spirit, I invite you to come and join us. Be our teacher now. Illuminate our paths and give us the truth as we are on this unknown road. We need you to lead us, Father, and to train us not what the world has trained us by. Teach us to understand, Lord, what is enough, and help us to prioritize the activities that you have ordained for us every day so that we might see your kingdom come, your will be done in our homes every day as it is your purposed in heaven. I pray this in your mighty name, Yeshua. Amen. Okay. So thank you for, Lord, reminding me that all of this is for your glory, not Eileen's, not Messianic Lamb Network. It's for your glory to share those things that you have brought into my heart, to share those things so that others might understand some of these warfare issues that they've never looked at as being such. Okay, so I just thought that, the whole concept of the shedding of the lamb's blood was such a powerful and symbolic representation of our first sin, and how we need to look at this now in a more personal perspective. And so I write here, so what's the point of all of this? What's the point? As you know, I'm a bottom line person. I try to get right into it. And how is that affecting our clothes closets today? So I write here that clothing protects our bodies against the elements and is very basic to everyone on this earth. Everyone, regardless of where you live, and whether it's a Western world, Eastern world, or people in the jungles, they still cover themselves up with clothes. So this is something that is worldwide. It's an issue that we are all dealing with. Everyone on this earth, from the beginning of time till the end of this time. So clothing does more than just cover us up. Clothing expresses a deep inner belief about who we are. And it's kind of a way that we want to just blend into our society at the time. We pick out clothes, we pick out things that that express our individual personalities and how we want others to perceive us as well. So I'll tell you about a client that I had several years back, and we had worked in her home in many different areas. And finally, we were going to get to her clothes closet. And she was so excited. You saw this on her face about how excited she was so that we could finally get into something in an area that she absolutely loved. Okay. And more than that, more than her love, she wanted me to witness her closet. She wanted me to see what was in that closet so that I would be so impressed about the kinds of things that she had in there. So upon entering the closet, I couldn't help but noticing all of the designer shoes, okay, and some of them were never worn. Many of these designer dresses that were just absolutely stunning and exquisite. And just the overall aura of status was all over this closet. And the professional organizing industry is, by its nature, a witness to what society values. So we see this because we are literally in your sock drawer and we see the value of what is important in people's lives. And so when our Western world hungers for significance and is basically willing to do anything to obtain attention, and I just see this all the time, especially going into closed closets. Getting noticed is the hallmark of all advertisements. So if you go back and you look at advertisements, no, it's not look at the drug ones, which are every other one now, but every other hallmark on ads are about our clothes and about how we can be more important than our next door neighbor and all of these other things. And as I'm reading scripture, I'm noticing that Yeshua has a lot to say about this. Okay. So I'm trying to find, this is in Matthew's chapter 23, verses 1 through 7. And I think this will pretty much clarify all of this. Jesus said to the crowd and to his disciples, this is like, when he's in the streets and he's teaching this, and there's not only the people there and his disciples, but there are probably going to be a lot of rabbis and Pharisees and Sadducees and all of those things that also are around him, because they can't believe what's coming out of his mouth when they hear him. So he says to them, the teachers of the law and Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. So you must be careful to do everything they tell you, but do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. Can you imagine their thoughts when they heard him say that? So anyway, he goes on to say, they tie up heavy, cumbersome loads and put them on other people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. Whoa. Okay. So he goes on and says, everything they do is for people to see. They make their phylacteries wide and their tassels on their garments long. They love the place of honor at banquets and the most important seats in the synagogue. They love to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and to be called rabbis by others. Yeah, that's pretty true today, isn't it? What we wear is a reflection of what we want other people to notice. And whether it's the Jimmy Choo shoes that we have on, or the designer, or the known labels that are everywhere now. I remember when growing up, there weren't any labels on the outside of clothes. That tells you how old I am. And as I guess I got into my 30s and 40s, these things started coming up. And I'm sitting here, why would you wear that? I remember that. I mean, it's like, why would anybody want to wear stuff like that says Nike or anything on their shirt? I mean, it didn't make sense to me at the time. But you can't go into your wardrobe now and not find almost every outfit, especially athletic outfits or things that do not have the title on them, because it's an expression of, look what I'm wearing. Look, I've spent good money on this. Look, So I think you kind of understand where I'm going with this, is that our society is no different than what Yeshua was saying to the Pharisees, um, and at that time, because they say, don't do what they say. I mean, don't do what they do what they say, because they're teaching you the law of Moses. That's good. But they are not doing anything that's reflective of it. But boy, are they dressing high. If you've seen any of The Chosen, which I highly, highly encourage you to do so, this particular topic is a subliminal topic that is shown every on every session, on every episode in The Chosen, because you will see the Sadducees, you will see the Pharisees, you will see all of them in this, and even the beginning where it has Matthew, the tax collector, showing these incredible sandals and his outfits and his things of that nature, where money was so important by not having the money, but how you showed you had the money. And that was through the clothes that they wore. And that is no different today. I just thought that I write here that the status of a rabbi was reflected in their garments and intended to indicate their spiritual superiority. Okay. They sought to increase that impression of superiority by the design and the placements, like Yeshua said, by the placements of the phylacteries and the tassels. And it was so important for them to reflect this rabbi attitude. And if you see this in The Chosen, you'll see this all the time, that they walk around with their chests real big and oh my gosh, look at me and I'm also important, by what they're wearing. And so we see this as professional organizers, like I said earlier, in the closets that we go into people's homes, that the closets may be filled with things that they're no longer using, but that it costs them a lot. And it's just sitting there. And it's really, really sad. So what I write here is that I see the twisted intent of the world searching for significance without the Lord. So without the Lord in our lives, people seek to fulfill their lives through things. And as a professional organizer, we see this every time, every day, that when we are either doing this virtually or in the space of the people, it's the things that they've owned is what they are trying to create their happiness and their fulfillment with. So I want you to take a few minutes and think about your closet right now, okay? Because a lot of the time I do is practical applications, and I want to get into some of that too with you today. But I want you to also look at your clothes as the emotional ties that you have to them and the beliefs that you had at one point that are no longer fitting with the clothes that you hold emotional attachments to. For instance, I was recently helping someone that had just had a baby a couple of years ago. But guess what was in her closet? A lot of pregnancy clothes, a lot of things. And she held a lot of emotional memories to the clothes and was having a really, really hard time expressing why she wanted to get rid of them. She didn't want to get rid of them. But what they were doing is that they were crowding out the space that she needed to have within the closet to be able to better see what she could wear now. So remember, a lot of the times I always say it in my sessions here, that there's no judgment. I do not come into the situation and go, if you're not wearing it, why is it here? No, the only way you can get a person to understand that change of emotional feeling is to have them go through the process of understanding why are they keeping what they're keeping. What is the significance physically, emotionally, and spiritually? And that's on everything, but especially in clothes, because clothes, remember, they represent who we are. They represent who we are to ourselves, and they represent who we are to others, how we want to express ourselves to others. So, so in this particular client's home, each of these items held a special memory. And it was really hard for her to let go of the memory and move on of, what it felt like being pregnant. This was my first child, all of these things. So it took a while. It's not an easy transference of thoughts here. It takes a while. And don't think that this has to be done overnight, because it's not going to be done overnight. But by praying and asking the Lord, if you blessed me with this, you are looking to see, how am I taking care of it? Am I using it? Or can I bless other people with it for the blessings that you gave me of it? And when I present it to my clients like that, when I say, okay, so what do you think the Lord would say? What do you think God sees when he's inside of you? So he's seeing what's around here. Oh, no, it's number one, right? What do you think he is telling you now? And most of the time, that's when the transformation takes place. When they begin to connect with Yeshua and begin to understand that the blessings that he blessed them with at the time when it was most needed are things that they can bless others with, that the Lord is just waiting to bless them with greater things, because they are able to let go of the things that are no longer serving their lives now, even though they have emotional attachments to them. Now, so that's a major number one thing of when you're looking at your identity in your clothes, looking at your closets. Is it a emotional museum? That I write that in my study. I say that that her closet had to become an emotional museum, because it reminded her of where she was in the past, but it was no longer serving her now. So when she understood that concept, the bins that she was able to fill were, I remember there were so many. It was such an incredible transformation in this woman's lives when she was willing and excited. Okay, she got it. She understood that the blessings of others creates even more blessings from the Lord in our lives. That is scriptural. And I write about that in my giving chapters, about when we give to others, he gives back to us. When we withhold from others, he withholds from us as well. All right. So I always state, okay, if you're going into your closet and you're looking around, one of the questions, now let's get practical here. One of the questions that you should ask yourselves is not, do I need this? But does it need me? So let's repeat that again. It's not, do I need this? But does it need me? All right. So here's Lori's story that I write in Get Organized God's Way. She writes, this one doesn't fit right. This one is worn out. All right. Or maybe someone else would like this item. This bargain was not such a bargain at all. And these are just some of the thoughts that went through my head as I cleaned out my closet. It's amazing how clothes collect and just hang there month after month, and some even year after year. My closet rods seemed to be letting a sigh of relief as I lifted off the unnecessary weight that they had been supporting. When they start sagging and they get heavier and heavier and heavier. Well, she also noticed that, Lori said, when she started getting things off it. It started going up and up and up and no longer it wasn't sagging. She said, my rods just seemed to let out a sigh of relief as I lifted off the unnecessary weight that they had been supporting. Now there was room for the remaining garments to hang freely and not to be wedged in so tightly that they suffered from wrinkles and creases. And as I looked at my closet, I thought about the prayer closet that Christians have with the Lord. It's not a literal closet, but it's a place in our hearts where we can commune with Him. Sometimes it seems as if life is so tightly packed with things that we are not able, that are not really valuable, or may even be unfitting in our walk with the Lord. We may have allowed ourselves to buy into things that are appropriate garments in our spiritual warfare. Let me repeat this. That was wrong. We may have allowed ourselves to buy into things that are not appropriate garments in our spiritual wardrobes. These items are dangerous because they can fill up our thoughts and time and cramping out space for the Lord. So again, let's look at this not only from a physical perspective, but as she is seeing her closet, her spiritual closet, filling up with things that are not appropriate either. It feels so good to get rid of unnecessary loads of compromise, frustration, anger, worry, pride, or whatever else we may have allowed the enemy to hang on us. Through prayer, we can ask God to help us take inventory of our hearts and toss out anything that may be getting in the way of His presence. Without the needless clutter, everything fits well and feels good. Our prayer closets become more restful, peaceful, and comforting when there is plenty of space for the Lord to abide. So I write in here, I say, how has your prayer life felt hindered lately? Try cleaning out your prayer closet. It's a wonderful relief to get rid of the excess and make room for the Lord. So yes, we have a literal closet that's filled with the things that are not of Him. And we have a spiritual closet that are things that are filled with things that are not of Him. And understanding this concept is really going to change a lot in our spiritual walk. And again, like I said, this isn't something that, happens immediately, although it could happen. But most of the time, this is a process. It's a step-by-step process that takes time to understand. But when you have the time spent with the Lord and saying, okay, Lord, what is it that I need to get rid of, both outwardly and inwardly, that reflects my identity of who I am? Is my identity so wrapped up in the world that I have to reflect myself in that perspective? Or is my identity wrapped up in you and what you are teaching me? And how is that expressed by what I own? All right, so let's get real practical now. Let me see. There is a verse here that's in Revelations 22:14, and it says, "Blessed are those who wash their robes. They will be permitted to enter through the gates of the city and to eat the fruit from the tree of life." Okay. There are many other instances in Revelation, especially of pure white clothes representing righteousness. So understand one thing, and the reason that I'm saying this before we get into the practical applications is that even when we are with Yeshua, face to face with Him in the next world, there are still going to be garments that we are going to be wearing. Garments are important. It's not saying that we are all going to be just, hanging out in some sort of crazy body that we have no idea what's. No, we are all going to be wearing garments. Now, some of them may be white, some of them may be other colors. We may have great sachets. Who knows what that's going to look at? But understand something that's really important here. There are going to be clothes. There are going to be things that they're going to be on us. And how that reflects our identity is no different now than it's going to be then. All right, so let's go back and let's look at some of the practical applications of what's in your closet. So the first step in looking at your closet, you might want to write this down, as in every time I talk about getting organized, what's the first thing I say? I say, what's your vision? What is it that you want it to be like? How do you want it to be used? Before you start doing anything, I want you to write down what your vision is. Do you want this to have only clothes in it? Do you want this to have other items that maybe are not, part of clothes, but are something else? I mean, there's so many reasons and things that people have, because everybody's an individual. They have different needs for their clothes closets. So decide, number one, what is your vision for it? Okay. And then here I write in here, it says, is the closet to remain a catch-all for other homeless items in your home, like I just said? Or are you willing to devote this space to just the clothes items that you're currently using? So get a vision. The next one is, before you even do anything with that vision, is make a criteria list. Now, this one is really, really important. Okay, so how can I explain this one? When I'm dealing with paper, okay, say you've got tons and tons of magazines and you want to keep X amount of magazines that are dated from 2022 on. And anything before 2022, you can let go of. All right, so that's a criteria. Okay, so you're looking at your clothes closet and you're saying, okay, Eileen, anything that is, I can't wear anymore, I've outgrown it. That's a criteria list. All right, I'm going to get rid of it. Anything that is too small on me, even though I am in the middle of trying to lose the weight, do I really want to keep this one or not? Okay, so in other words, making a criteria list as to what clothes used to fit aren't fitting anymore, that maybe you may want to be getting into, or maybe have a clothes thing that's going to give you a motivation to keep on, eating well, that kind of thing. That's very personal. But what you need to do is create a criteria list. Okay, so that when you come across the clothes that no longer fit, or the clothes that are stained, or the clothes that have rips in it, or the clothes that have, let's see, what are some of the other things, that you don't like anymore, things that, maybe you can bless someone else with. Those are all criteria things, and write them down so that when you come to the item that you are looking at, does it fit in your criteria list? Does it already have the decision made for you? Or do you have to make a decision on it? When you have, remember, clutter and overcrowding and all of that is nothing more than postponed decisions. I'll repeat that. Your clutter and your, out of craziness closet is nothing more than you postponing the decision that you have to make now. But by making a criteria list, you've already, that 75 to 80% of your decision making has already been established. And so when you look at the item, you will already know the answer to that question before you even get started. And that's going to help tremendously. Okay. So I also write in here that I've had many clients find past Christmas presents buried 2 feet deep in their closets. Okay. Maybe some of you can relate to that one. So look at your closet and see what's in it. Now, I have one of my favorite stories is, and I've said this one before, is when she was going through her closet, she saw a bin that was of her father's funeral. And she hadn't looked at it. She wanted to, she knew that at some point down the line she was going to look at it and take care of it and all this stuff. But it had been literally years since she had gone through it. In fact, when she started unpiling, all of a sudden, she realized this is way up there. And so she took it down and she started looking at it, and she heard from the Lord. The Lord said, your father is not in these things. And she said, Eileen, she goes, that was so powerful. She says, I was able to get rid of 90.9%. I think she saved one or two items that was in that big bin. She said, I was able to get rid of it, knowing that I wasn't dishonoring my father, that I would be seeing my father in the future. And that area that was crowding out of the things that I needed the space for was going to be used in a much more practical and presentable way. So understand, we hold things like Christmas presents and, funeral items and all kinds of things in our closets, thinking that we will get to them at some point, and we never do. So that's just another practical application of look at what's inside your closet, and anything that is not necessary to be in there right now, then try to find a place where it is most appropriate for it. And if it means, like she did, getting rid of it because of a spiritual warfare issue or any other things, then you know what to do with that. Okay, so here are some of the practical steps to eliminate the items. I've already mentioned, don't keep it if it's too big or too small. All right. And some of them may be of the questionable things like, okay, maybe this will motivate me, so maybe I'll keep one of these items. It's yours. It's you. I mean, I'm saying that because that's what I did. I saved this because it's like, okay, I'm going to fit in this in X amount of months. And am I going to keep to my program to be able to do so? So that's a motivator. All right. The next one is, don't keep it if you don't like it. Okay. I know that sounds like a no-brainer, right? But get rid of it today, right? If you don't like something, get rid of it or bless someone else with it. Again, don't keep it if it's stained. If you can't get the stain out, you've tried and tried, and you're not going to wear it, then let's let it go. And again, a lot of things people wear that are, that they notice that are torn, and they say, okay, I'm going to sew this up, or I'm going to do something with it. And they never do. Get rid of it if it's torn. Okay. And I like this one a lot. It's don't keep it just because it's a once you only wore it one time. Okay. So that's like my son's dresses I wore to their wedding. Okay. Like, why are they still there? Okay. They're still there. I'm thinking, will I still wear them? Probably not. So Eileen's talking to Eileen because I'm just like you. And I'm saying, okay, maybe out of the three, I should let one of those go and bless someone else with it. Knowing that I am just like you, and knowing that God is saying, okay, Eileen, are you going to be authentic in your walk? Okay. And that's going to go on my list this week is where I know exactly where I'm going to take it now. And I know which one. And I just love how the Lord speaks to all of us as we are speaking. It's not just to you. He speaks to me as well. And the other one is match your item. Here's for another practical application. Is that you have an item you really, really love, but you very rarely wear it. Why? Because you don't have anything in your closet that you can readily wear with. Okay, so, look for something either online or go shopping or whatever to find something that's going to match it so that you will actually wear that item that you say that you like a lot. All right. And I love these next two. This one is, don't keep it just because it was expensive. It's just hanging up there. It's not doing anything, but because you spent a lot of money on it, you're keeping it. And this one is especially very hard to get rid of, things that were a gift. It's a gift. I would feel so guilty if I didn't keep it. No, I'm giving you permission. And that's what I do a lot of times. I go into my clients' lives and I say, okay, the professional organizer is giving you permission to get rid of it, even though it was a gift. Because the person that gave it to you probably doesn't even remember that they gave it to you. They don't even remember what it was that they gave you. So you can get rid of it, or you can give it to someone else and bless someone else with it. So I write here, our identity in Christ is wrapped up in our outer garments. You don't believe me? Just look at what you're wearing right now. Okay? Look at the identity that you want to portray to others by exactly what you are wearing now. All right, look at it. All right, and get a better understanding of how our closets are an identity issue. All right, and where that identity issue should be. All right, so there are a lot of things that are in the study that I don't have time to go into right now, but I want to read to you the last thing that I have in the study. It's always a take it to God prayer. And it says, Father, you say that when I pray, I am to go into my closet, shut the door, and pray in secret, so that when I pray, I am concentrating on you. Right now, if I go into my closet, I'm afraid that the only thing I can get in is my left foot. I have crammed so much unwanted and unneeded junk in there that there's no room left for me, let alone you, God. It seems that my closet has been a metaphor of my life. I'm continuing to cram into my life to overflowing without filling my heart with the most important things, time with you, and my eternal things that come from you. My closet represents who I am, who I was, and who I am presumed to be, putting my identity in my outer garments and not in Christ Jesus. Father, as I begin to shed these superficial outer garments of my life, I pray that your Holy Spirit will come in and fill me and will clothe me. Help me to reflect on what's most important, reflecting on the eternal and not on the material. So before we wrap up, I just want to take a moment to thank you for joining me today. And if you have more information that you want to know about, go to my website, eileenkaufministries.com, or you can go to my YouTube at Eileen Kauf Ministries at YouTube. Until next time, shalom mishpacha, shalom shalom, and may the blessings of God be abundantly in your life. If you missed today's show or want to watch it again, or want to tell someone where they can watch this episode, go to lambnetwork.tv, where you will find this show and all the other live Lamb show archives in the on-demand section of the website. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to tell someone about the Messianic Lamb Network. We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussions, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the lambnetwork.tv website. I'm Eileen Koff, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.